Welcome back, everybody. I'm Travis with Linux Academy. In the previous lesson, we covered the volume subcommand and how we can go and list, create, and delete volumes. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about bind mounts. Bind mounts have been around for a pretty long time, and their functionality is pretty limited when compared to volumes. When we use a bind mount, the file or the directory that is being used on the host machine is going to be mounted into the container. For example, let's say we have a pre-existing code directory located in root. We can go and mount the code directory into var code on our container. And as we know, volumes work a little bit differently. When we go and create a new volume, its directory is going to be located within the Docker storage directory, which on Linux is var lib docker volumes. Even though volumes is the preferred method for maintaining persistent data, bind mounts do have their use cases, specifically if we want to go and mount a single file into our container. A good example of this is configuration files. When it comes to creating a bind mount, there's two ways we can do it. We can use the mount flag or we can use the volume flag. And we'll be starting the demo off by using the mount flag. Before we get started, we need to go and create the directory. So I'm just going to go and create the target directory within my home directory. If the directory doesn't exist, when we go and create the container, we're going to get an error. Now that we've gone and created the directory, let's execute a Docker container run. We're going to be running our container in the background, so we'll be using the D flag. The name of the container is going to be nginx bind mount 1. Next, we supply the mount flag. And we do have a couple of options. The first one is type. Type can either be a bind mount or a volume. And since we're using a bind mount, we'll be specifying bind. All options are going to be separated with a comma. Next, we need to go and specify the source. And I can do this by specifying the full path to the source. Or in this instance, I'm executing the pwd command to get the path for the current directory that I'm in, and then I'm appending it with /target. So the source is going to be set to /home/cloud-user/target. Again, I'm separating my options with a comma, and next we're going to go and specify the destination. Now we can either use destination or target, and we use this to set what directory is going to be mounted in the container. In this instance, it's going to be /app. And finally, I'm going to specify the nginx image. Now that the container has been created, let's go and verify that everything is functioning as intended. Everything looks good, our container is up and running. Now let's see what happens when we run docker volume ls. As you can see, there's no volumes. And the reason why is because we created a bind mount and not a volume. So bind mounts are not going to be managed by the volume subcommand. Now to make sure that everything was mounted properly, we can go and execute a docker container inspect on nginx bind mount 1. We're going to go and look for the mount section. And as you can see here, we do have our bind mount. The type is bind. Our source is going to be home cloud user target, and the destination is app on the container. Now let's take a look and see how our bind mount works with our container. First thing I do is I'm going to go into the target directory, and then I'm going to create a file by executing touch file1.txt. I can go ahead and list the contents of my directory, and as you can see, file1.txt is present. Now we're going to go and log into the container by executing docker container exec. We will make sure that we supply the int flag, the name of the container, which is nginx bind mount 1, and then we supply bin bash. Now I could do an ls, and you can see that we have the app directory. If I cd into that directory and do an ls, you can see our text file. Now we're going to go and create a second file by executing touch file2.txt. By running ls, we can go and verify that the file was created. Now I'm going to go and exit out of my container and execute an ls, and as you can see, file2.txt is indeed in the target directory. Now we're going to go and create a bind mount using the volume flag. Before we get started, I want to make sure that we drop back down into our home directory. Now we're going to go and create a bind mount using the volume flag. Just like before, we're going to be executing a docker container run. We're using the D flag. This container is going to be called nginx bind mount 2. However, rather than using the mount flag, we're going to be using the volume flag. And we can use this one of two ways. We can just do -v, which is the shorthand, or we can do --volume. Just like before, we're using the pwd command to use the current directory, and we're appending target2. So my source is going to be /home/cloud-user/target2. Now, one thing I want to point out, I did not go and create this directory because I don't have to. Next, we use a colon to separate the source from the target, and our destination is going to be /app. Just like before, we'll be using the nginx image. Now, when I do an ls, you can see that target2 was created for me. I didn't go and create this previously. Rather than logging into the container this time, I'm going to use the touch command to create a file. Execute docker container exec -it nginx bind mount 2 And then our command is going to be touch/app/file3.txt. When I run ls-target2, you can see that the file was created. Now I have one last example I can show you. Previously, I mentioned that we can go and use bind mounts to mount a file into a container, and that this is great for managing configuration files. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create an Nginx directory. And now I'm going to go and create an Nginx conf file in the Nginx directory. To make your life easier, this command is in the description of the video. Now we're going to go and create a new container. We're going to go and execute a docker run. We're using the D flag. This container is going to be called Nginx bind mount 3. We'll be using the volume flag. And just like before, we're using pwd. And then we're appending /nginx/nginx.conf. Use a colon to separate the source from the target. And the destination is going to be etc nginx nginx.conf. And like the previous two times, we'll be using the Nginx image. Now that the container has been created, let's go and inspect it. Go and look for the mount, and you can see that we do have our bind mount here, and that our source is going to be home cloud user nginx nginx.conf, and the destination is going to be etc nginx nginx.conf. The reason why using a bind mount to manage a configuration file is pretty handy is it allows us to go and make a change to that file and then restart the container to go and pick it up. This way, we don't have to go and make a change to an image, rebuild it, and then go and redeploy the container. Now we could do the same thing using a volume, but instead it would be managing the entire directory where the config file is located. If we're making changes to multiple files, using a volume would make sense. However, if we're just managing a single file, we can get away with using a bind mount instead. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to start working with volumes to manage persistent data. Go ahead and mark this lesson complete.